On August 3, 1966, police were called to a house on Hollywood Boulevard in the hills above Los Angeles. On the bathroom floor, they found the body of a 40-year-old man, a syringe nearby. And instead of sealing the scene, the officers stood back and let news photographers file through the house, which is why the last picture America ever saw of Lenny Bruce was his corpse on the tile, printed in the papers. 5 years earlier, he had been the most talked about comedian in the country. He sold out Carnegie Hall at midnight in a blizzard. Critics compared him to Jonathan Swift. What ended him wasn't a scandal, and it wasn't only the drugs. Between 1961 and 1964, Lenny Bruce was arrested again and again. Not for anything he did, but for words he said out loud on a stage to adults who had paid to hear him say them. The United States put a comedian on trial for talking. This is how it happened and what it cost him. He was born Leonard Alfred Schneider in October 1925 in Mineola, New York. And after his parents split up, he spent his boyhood bouncing between relatives. In 1942, he volunteered for the Navy, 5'2", 120 pounds, and spent 3 years as a shell passer on the light cruiser USS Brooklyn off North Africa, Italy, and the south of France. He wrote later about watching the bodies of 40 airmen float past the ship. By 1945, he'd had enough, and he got out in the most Lenny way imaginable. He did his act for shipmates in women's clothing, then told the ship's doctor things no doctor wanted in his file, and the Navy sent him home, with papers later upgraded to read, "Under honorable conditions." Back in New York, he changed his name to Bruce and worked the amateur nights, clubs that advertised $100 prizes and quietly paid ringers like him a couple of bucks instead. That led to Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, and he won it. And suddenly, he was earning $450 a week doing impressions. Then he started losing rooms. His material was getting stranger and more personal. Bookings dried up, and he filled the gaps with vaudeville dates that paid less than $20 a night. He admitted later he was afraid he didn't have it. In 1951, he married Honey Harlow, a stripper he'd met in Baltimore. And to get money, he pulled the strangest scheme on his record. He stole clerical garb from a New York rectory, chartered a foundation supposedly raising funds for a leper colony in British Guyana, and worked the wealthy widows of Miami Beach. By his own telling, he collected $8,000, sent $2,500 to the actual leper colony, and kept the rest as, in his words, operating expenses. He was arrested for panhandling of all things and moved on. What rebuilt him was burlesque. Through the mid-50s, he was the house comic in Southern California strip clubs, 4 shows a night for audiences who weren't listening anyway. 4 years working in clubs, that's what really made it for me, he said. No pressure on you, so I could try anything. In those rooms, the act stopped being impressions and started being Lenny. His daughter Kitty was born in 1955. The marriage didn't survive the decade. By 1957, the word on Lenny Bruce had spread well past the strip clubs, and the bit that did it was called Religions Incorporated. A sketch where America's religious leaders gather at corporate headquarters to swap fundraising tips like sales executives. Nobody else was doing anything close to that on an American stage in the 1950s. Hugh Hefner heard him and booked him into the Cloister in Chicago. And in April 1959, Steve Allen put him on national television with an introduction that doubled as a warning. the most shocking comedian of our time, a young man who is skyrocketing to fame, Lenny Bruce. Time magazine had a different label. It filed him under sick comic, and the tag followed him for the rest of his life. It made him furious, not because it stung, but because he thought it was exactly backwards. To Lenny, the sick comedy was the mainstream stuff, the mother-in-law jokes, the crude ethnic caricatures, the acts that got laughs out of stutters and physical defects. He was talking about segregation, capital punishment, religion, and sex, the things the country was actually sick with, and he thought the shock belonged on greed and hypocrisy, not on four-letter words. He had a theory about language. A forbidden word is only dangerous because it's forbidden. In one routine, he repeated an ugly racial slur flatly, over and over, until it crumbled into noise. His argument being that suppression is exactly what keeps the poison in a word. You could argue with the method, and plenty did, but it was a philosophy, not a shock act. The peak came on February 4th, 1961. A midnight concert at Carnegie Hall, sold out in the middle of a blizzard that had buried the city. His biographer, Albert Goldman, called it the greatest performance of his career. The critic Nat Hentoff wrote that every Bruce show ran on the same current of anxiety. How far will he go tonight? 8 months later, the police started answering that question for him. In the fall of 1961, he was arrested twice in about a week. Philadelphia came first, a narcotics charge. The habit went back, his doctor said, to amphetamines prescribed after a bout of hepatitis in his Navy years, and it never let go of him. Then, on October 4th, 1961, at the Jazz Workshop in San Francisco, he was arrested for obscenity, for one word. 10 letters, unprintable in any American newspaper of the day. A word this documentary can't say either, 65 years later. He would have found that funny, because it was exactly his point. The trial that spring became a preview of what was coming. His lawyer, Albert Bendick, took the case alone, after another attorney turned it down flat. "You can't win a case built on that word," the man said. Bendick told the jury that Bruce stood in the tradition of Aristophanes and Jonathan Swift, and played the jurors the full tape of the show. In March 1962, they acquitted him. It didn't matter. The arrests kept coming, city by city. October 1962, the Troubadour in West Hollywood. December 5th, 1962, the Gate of Horn in Chicago, where officers stopped the show and took him out mid-set. And a 25-year-old comic in the audience named George Carlin refused to show them his ID and got thrown into the same paddy wagon. Bruce asked what he was in for, and when Carlin proudly told him, gave the only review that fit. One word: schmuck. Chicago was where it turned. The trial ran on partly without him. He'd been arrested on another narcotics charge in California during a recess, and the prosecution leaned hard on testimony that the act mocked the Catholic Church. The jury convicted him in about an hour, and in March 1963, the judge gave him a year in jail. That same spring, he flew to England for a booking and never got out of the airport, deported as an undesirable. In 1964, the Illinois Supreme Court threw the Chicago conviction out. His act, the court found, was speech the First Amendment protects. He had won again, technically. By then, he'd concluded there was only one city left in America where he could still safely work. He was wrong about that, too. In late March 1964, Lenny Bruce opened a run at the Café Au Go-Go in Greenwich Village at $3,500 a week. 350 people a night. Lenny performing in a cast for a sprained ankle. On March 31st, a city license inspector named Herbert Rue took a table 1 row from the stage. Rue was a former CIA officer, and he spent the set scribbling fragments of the act into a notebook, reviews in the margins, philosophical claptrap on human nature. His notes went to the district attorney's office, which taped the next night's show, and on April 2nd, a grand jury indicted the comedian off a typed, partial transcript of a nightclub act. 3 counts under a statute banning entertainment that would tend to the corruption of the morals of youth and others, each carrying up to 3 years. On April 3rd, plainclothes officers arrested Bruce and the club's owner, Howard Solomon, before the 10 o'clock show. Bruce made bail and walked back onto the same stage the next night. Days later, they arrested him again, and this time they took Solomon's wife, Ella, too. The city's artists understood immediately what was happening. Allen Ginsberg formed an emergency committee, and more than 80 famous names signed its petition. Paul Newman, Bob Dylan, Norman Mailer, James Baldwin, Woody Allen, even the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. We believe he should be allowed to perform free from censorship or harassment. The trial opened on June 16, 1964. No jury, 3 judges, John Murtaugh presiding. The prosecution's star witness was Rue, who reperformed the act from his notes, badly, while Bruce absorbed the real problem. I'm going to be judged by his bad timing, his ego, his garbled language. The defense's most striking witness was Dorothy Kilgallen, a columnist so mainstream she sat on the panel of What's My Line, who testified that Bruce was a brilliant satirist, perhaps the most brilliant that I have ever seen, and that he used forbidden words the way playwrights use them on Broadway, because that is how people talk. On November 4th, 1964, the judges voted 2-1, guilty. Bruce had fired his lawyers by then, and he stood up alone and begged, "Please let me testify. Let me tell you what the show is about. And then, don't lock up these 6,000 words." At sentencing that December, he spoke for 1 hour and 2 minutes, and ended by asking the judges to just hear the act once before ruling on it. They declined. The sentence was 4 months in the workhouse. He never served the sentence. He stayed free on bond while the appeal crawled forward. But the conviction did its real work anyway, nationwide. Howard Solomon had been convicted too, for nothing more than owning the room Lenny said the words in. And every club owner in America could do that math. Book Lenny Bruce, and you weren't risking a bad night at the till. You were risking your own arrest and your liquor license. So they stopped booking him. Not some of them, nearly all of them. The most notorious comedian in America was shut out of almost every nightclub in the United States, without any blacklist ever being written down. And the act itself was dying, because the act had become the trials. He walked on stage with court transcripts and read them aloud. His own words in a police officer's mouth entered into evidence, and cross-examined judges who weren't in the room. During the New York trial, hospitalized with pleurisy, he had read law books cover to cover and complained to his own lawyers about the precedents they were leaving out. Now the law was most of the performance. He burned what money remained, filing civil suits against the prosecutors and judges. Audiences who had come to see the fastest mind in American comedy watched a sick man litigate instead. In October 1965, he was declared legally bankrupt. The man who had been earning $3,500 a week only 18 months before. The morphine went on. On June 25, 1966, he played the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco, a hall usually reserved for rock bands, in front of kids who knew him less as a comedian than as a cause. It was his last performance. 5 weeks later, the photographers were in his bathroom. The coroner ruled it acute morphine poisoning, an accidental overdose. He was 40 years old. The police held the scene open, and the press photographed Lenny Bruce where he fell. One last indignity for a man whose entire offense had been committed fully clothed into a microphone. By one account, a cop looked down at the body that afternoon and said, "There is nothing sadder than an aging hipster," a line so much like a Lenny Bruce bit that people have wondered ever since whether it started as one. His conviction was still on the books when he died, and under New York law, his appeal simply died with him, which meant the verdict against Lenny Bruce would outlive Lenny Bruce by decades. The eulogies said what the courts wouldn't. Dick Schaap ended his, in Playboy, with a line that has outlasted nearly everything else written about the trials. One last four-letter word for Lenny: dead at 40. That's obscene. And eventually the confession came from inside the prosecution itself. Vincent Kucha, one of the assistant district attorneys on the New York case, said this on the record: "I feel terrible about Bruce. We drove him into poverty and bankruptcy and then murdered him. I watched him gradually fall apart. It's the only thing I did in Hogan's office that I'm really ashamed of. We all knew what we were doing. We used the law to kill him." There is nothing to add to a confession like that. The vindication arrived on schedule for everyone else. Howard Solomon's conviction was overturned on appeal, and New York's highest court let that stand in 1970. Same show, same words, no crime. In 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court reached the underlying question in Cohen versus California. A state cannot make a crime of a four-letter word by itself, because, in Justice Harlan's phrase, one man's vulgarity is another's lyric. That was 5 years after the bathroom floor. Every comedian who came after knew what they had been handed. George Carlin, who rode the paddy wagon in Chicago, put it plainly: Lenny Bruce opened the doors for all the guys like me. The kind of prosecution that consumed the last 5 years of Bruce's life became effectively impossible. In 2003, a campaign of First Amendment lawyers and entertainers, Robin Williams, the Smothers Brothers, Penn and Teller, petitioned New York to clear him, and on December 23, 2003, Governor George Pataki granted Lenny Bruce the first posthumous pardon in the state's history. 39 years after the conviction, 37 after his death. Buried in the record of the New York trial is a letter Bruce wrote to the judge while the verdict was pending. Pages of dictionary citations and case law, and near the end, 5 words that were the whole defense, the whole act, and the whole man. Communication is my desire. It took New York 39 years to answer him.